What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy, Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, episode 109, cheeky Thursday mini-poddy, looking at specifically UFC 231, the card, and I suppose we'll probably be focusing on the main and co-main event. But before we get into that, we'll do a little bit of news. Don't know if we touched on it last time, but Dominic Cruz versus John Lineker is officially set for UFC 223 in Anaheim. Sorry, 233. Yeah, if you've not been keeping up with the state of the bantamweight division, TJ Dillashaw is busy fighting Henry Cejudo, which has just been announced to be on the ESPN Plus first card. Kill the division and get an easy title fight in there on the first attempt. Very nice. But they set up Marlon Moraes and Rafael Assunção, who are basically the two dudes due a title shot. Moraes for the guys he beat in quick succession by incredible knockout. And Assunção for continually beating everyone who's not TJ Dillashaw and going to a very close decision against TJ Dillashaw both times, or, close-ish decision second time. But Dominic Cruz is being thrown in with John Lineker because John Lineker is a tailor-made matchup for him. We've watched John Lineker lose to dudes who moved, basically, the last two times he lost, in very recent memory. So Cruz is getting a tune-up here, and then they're going to bounce him right into the title fight with TJ and basically skip over. Well, maybe they'll let Moraes have a title shot, but they're never letting Assunção have a title shot because he's boring and Brazilian, and he's lost to TJ already. And I say that as a big fan of Assunção. Assunção should be fighting Dominic Cruz. He should have been fighting Dominic Cruz at some point in the last 5 years, but never going to happen. I asked on Twitter, does anyone actually prefer this fight to Dom fighting either Moraes or Assunção? And the answer was a resounding yes. Dominic Cruz prefers this fight. What else is going on? We touched on Cejudo versus Dillashaw being announced for UFC Brooklyn, January 19th. Very first card on UFC on ESPN. A little bit of a contrast to the very first card UFC on Fox, which you'll remember was Junior Dos Santos versus Cain Velasquez. They booked out an hour of programming time, did no other fights, just did this pre-fight show where they were hyping up Cain Velasquez, and then he comes out and gets knocked out almost immediately. What was it, 20? It was less than a minute, I remember that much. And it was just, they were the laughing stock of the media for the next couple of days. So hopefully they put on some other fights. And just treat it like a normal fight card is what I'd say. And then, you've got a decent fight at the top there with Cejudo versus Dillashaw. Try and be like a normal fucking league, or you just show whatever's going on that week, and sometimes it's very good and sometimes it's not. But people tune in because it might be good. What else going on? Oh, Michael Johnson has said that he'd fight Zabit Magomedsharipov. He talked about fighting Aldo, but obviously he's a little bit below that at the moment in rankings, based on how his last few fights have gone. But he did say he'd fight Zabit Magomedsharipov, and I went to check the comments. All the comments talking about how everyone's ducking Zabit in the same thread that's about Michael Johnson saying, yeah, I'd fight Zabit. Spin kicks make people retarded. And I'm not getting spin kicked. Watching people do spin kicks makes idiots out of fight fans. They're just like, yeah, I reckon this guy's title ready. And everyone's ducking him because his manager said so. I like that fight for Zabit. I think that's a really good stepping stone into a higher level of competition. But it's the same with Zabit as it is with Anderson and Shevchenko, who we're going to be talking about a lot today. But, I like the fighter. The fan base is just so over the top and out of touch with reality. Journalism drama. Greg Hardy. Someone pointed out that Greg Hardy is debuting on the same card that Rachel Ostovich is fighting. And Greg Hardy obviously bombed out of his first career in the NFL because he beat the shit out of his partner at the time. And the whole thing about him coming back was he had to go on the contender series first because, he gets a second chance, but, we'll make him work his way up to the UFC. Now he's got his first UFC fight. And you would think someone in the room would say, everyone's going to be looking to write an op-ed about Greg Hardy debuting in the UFC and what that says about domestic abuse and our attitudes to that. We've got to be really careful with this one. And they managed to put him on the same card as the woman who just pulled out of a fight because of being abused by her, was it husband or just partner? But yeah, either way, stunningly tone deaf. And I really hope that's overlooking something, and that they're not just... Because the fight game is one where, you know, if you manufacture drama for really bad reasons, you still manufacture drama. Because you're appealing to people's basest instincts. People will still either tune in or, you know, the next day, if Greg Hardy loses, the GIFs on Reddit and everyone will be talking about it. It's amazing advertising for the UFC. Even if it's not, like, good moral advertising for them. It's exactly the same thing as the dolly. Absolutely reprehensible, and then immediately used in promo footage. Just like if they ever get the rematch between McGregor and Habib jumping on Dylan Dennis is going to be used in the trailer. Fight promoters are unscrupulous people. As I always say, Don King put up posters in Zaire for the Rumble in the Jungle with a diagram of a slave ship, the very famous diagram with all the how the slaves were laid out to make, you know, maximum use of hold space for chattel people. And the slogan was "From the slave ship to the championship." So yeah, it's been the same way for however long. Fight promoters aren't above just being trash. I hope this is an oversight, and I hope that it's just some idiot that's done this by accident, but the UFC 231 pre-fight presser, someone came out beforehand and said to the press, "We will only be taking questions about Rampart. Please don't ask about Greg Hardy." It gets even worse because, you know, people... Well, maybe this is the strategy. Maybe it is to get 1,000 hacky writers to put out shitty op-eds on Deadspin and Medium and whatever else. But... it's doubly bad that they put him on the same card with Paige Van Zandt. Obviously not the same thing. Well, you know, we stopped making fun of Paige Van Zandt a little while ago because I'm all up for making fun of people being tits and saying silly things. But when her book came out, it turned out some genuinely bad stuff had happened to her. And I felt, you know, incredibly bad about making fun of her. But yeah, she has also been a victim of another kind of abuse at the hands of dudes. So even weirder, or rather just looks even worse when you write it down on paper. The MMA Journos Union, whenever I say that, I can't help but think of that picture from Arrested Development with the Wizards Guild or whatever it is, Magicians Guild, and it's just a load of guys in different magician/wizard get-ups with a sign saying, "We demand to be taken seriously." But the MMA Journalists Association put out a thing just saying, like, they're going to look into it. But every member was there, so I don't know what they're going to look into. Oh well, just baffling. More important news, the winner of Czech Congo versus Vitaly Minakov gets the winner of Fedor versus Bader. I'm going to call him Ryan Bader from now on. Yeah, so they get a heavyweight title shot. Czech Congo, heavyweight title contender. That really underlines how, even with your heavyweight tournament, how bad your division is. He chinned a couple of bums, and now he's getting a title shot if he beats Minakov. And Minakov, I've tried to be high on the guy, but he has... We're 5 years on from, like, the first time I said, I'd like to see Minakov fight someone good. And he still fought nobody except Congo once, and Bigfoot Silva, the ghost of. Still, Minakov smashing Fedor would just be a nice passing of the torch, the one that I said we could have had in the heavyweight tournament to begin with. And that's if Bader can't lay all over him first. So we'll see. Or will we? Depends if Bellator goes under before then. To be fair, Bellator... Scott Coker actually has been doing a pretty good job of building... When you compare, like, what Scott Coker's done to... Scott Coker, I make fun of him for being an unscrupulous hack who will use shitty old man fights to get people in to watch his other fights. But he does actually get people in the gate, and then he'll put on an event where you're going, Alessio Sakara is headlining, fuck's sake, but sells out in Italy. And he's actually making great money at the gate. And then you compare that with ONE FC, whose business model is venture capital, and then our fights are available free on an app. You're going, where's the money coming in? This makes no sense. It's not a viable business. But we'll see. Apparently ONE FC's up for the Fox deal, so we will see. And then the most important piece of news that's broken since the last time we spoke, Sijara Eubanks is going up to bantamweight to run that division too, which leaves only 2 women at flyweight who've never fought there. But we'll be talking about them later. Actually, now. Right, let's move on. UFC 231. Let's talk about it. Brian Ortega versus Max Holloway. Brian v. Max. Holloway versus Ortega, whichever you... Pick your formal or informal version. I used to not write first names in articles because it made it seem like you favoured one guy. And now I write them because it makes me seem like I'm a fedora-wearing old-timey boxing guy. Same with shortening champion to the champ. But I'm letting you know, on the tricks of the trade now, if you ever want to start writing about MMA or just fighting in general. Holloway versus Ortega was cancelled the first time round after the famous quote is concussion-like symptoms from Holloway. Very concerning, slurring his speech during the run-up to the fight. And now everyone's playing amateur neurologist, I am too, and we're all watching these embedded videos and going, he's still sort of slurring his speech. Did he always speak like that? They have subtitled him at points. Yeah, a little bit concerning, but that's the thing. Max Holloway is so talented. It's ridiculous how good this lad is. But I think if he ends up like falling, his career falls off a cliff, or he just is a shambling mess by the time that he's 35, I think we're going to look at the things like the agreeing to swing with Ricardo Lamas and things like that a lot differently. The guy takes a lot of shots that he doesn't need to. He's very, very good, and he's just sort of there to be hit a lot of the time when he could not be, and he, it's totally within his ability to not be there to be hit. It's that machismo stuff. Roberto Duran, very famous for being all about machismo, but also very good at not getting hit. If you watch a Roberto Duran fight, half of it is him convincing the opponent that they're going to trade, and then not actually trading with them. He'll land his shots and then smother them. But this fight's the whole thing is weird with Brian Ortega. He's a very strange chap, in that we're all super high on his striking now, even though it's very, very messy. If you watch him fight Moicano was boxing him up. He does like a shoulder roll, and his chin is far enough away from his shoulder that you can still get the right straight through. So Moicano's just hitting him with right straights, and he's like, I'm rolling these off with my chin. I saw someone say that they expected him to methodically take Max apart, and I was just thinking there's nothing methodical about Ortega. He has showings of real... like a gift for this game. When, like I say, Matt Brown had a gift for violence. Just doing things that you would take a long time to teach someone, but he seems to do them as instinct. When you see him go to the body, like, he'll just do it on a whim, and you'll go, God, if you did that more, you'd just kill people with body shots. You wouldn't be known for your triangle. You'd be known for body shotting people. The elbow he caught Edgar stepping in with. He's landed a couple of good elbows in his UFC run, but it doesn't do them an awful lot. His jab actually looked really good against Edgar. He was doubling and tripling it. He was feinting it and then coming with it immediately after, the Tyson Fury style, the GSP style. If you watch GSP and Robert Whittaker, they bounce around in like a shorter stance. They step in deep into a long stance, and then they pause for a beat as the opponent like flinches, and then they jab on the end of it. That's a fantastic way to land jabs. And he did a little bit of that too. And he goes from both stances. He'll switch to southpaw and orthodox. But yeah, doesn't really have a kicking game. Doesn't really work in combinations all that well. Has a shoulder roll, but doesn't really use it as a platform to build counter-striking off. So a bit of an enigma on the feet. And the uppercut he took out Frankie with was like a bus driver uppercut. No one was calling that like a perfect uppercut. I mean, one of the real interesting things about Ortega through his UFC run has been that he's very good off his back. He worked with Henry Gracie and that a lot. Very good guard for MMA. Does a lot of like if the opponent starts to tripod on him or lean on him, he'll push him away, build a frame, and then drop it and elbow them in the head. Opened up Tavares something awful, and very good with triangles and attacks like that. Also excellent with the guillotine and the front headlock game, which obviously, if you shoot on him, he's going to grab a hold of your head and start trying to look for things. Frankie Edgar found that out, went for a takedown attempt, immediately backed out again, and then never went for it again. So he's in this interesting position where he's very much like a counter wrestler. And there are a lot of very good wrestlers and grapplers in the UFC featherweight division. He's fought guys like Clay Guida. And it's especially funny when you consider that Conor McGregor came through fighting almost no wrestlers. But yeah, it looks a lot more ordinary against guys, well, on the feet against guys like, Cub Swanson's getting a bit old now and a bit shoddy, and he looked very small compared to Brian Ortega, but Ortega was still giving him trouble on the feet, and then forced a clinch and snapped down. Was that on both occasions, in the first round and the second round? But yeah, like Tony Ferguson, he's a tall guy for the class, and he's really using the snap down well. You don't see an awful lot of snapping dudes down in MMA. And the weird part, or I suppose weird, but the interesting part is that it's not the wrestlers who are doing very well off it. It's the jiu-jitsu guys like Tony and Ortega. If you snap a guy down into the front headlock, you've got all those attacks. In wrestling, the front headlock is especially useful for the go behind. And if you watch Tony versus, I think it was Gleison Tebow, but there's a couple of guys who, as soon as he snapped them down, they freaked out, tried to get on his wrists, or just shelled up, and he's gone immediately round to their back and just worked from there. But Tony and Ortega are both really good at using, Ferguson's good with the DAS, and Ortega is very good at looking for the anaconda. If you watch the one against Cub Swanson, he does a proper roll over the top into like inverted north-south, and then roll back Rafael Mendez style rolling anaconda. The snapdowns that he hit, though, aren't like Tony's ones, which often come out of the boxing or things like that. He hit the snapdown from like a body lock over Cub Swanson's underhook, and so he like shucked him down into the underhook side, so both arms were over the top. Guys like Billy Robinson, like old school guys like that. Well, we're talking about Wigan wrestling again. But guys like Billy Robinson, when they taught snapping down into the front headlock, and they'd go into like the grobbit, which is an old neck crank, they'd really stress if you're snapping down with like a collar tie or something like that, you throw them across into your other armpit. You don't snap them down into the same armpit, because if you have both hands over the top, you're putting yourself in position to be picked up. And I think if obviously Swanson was a bit smaller, but Holloway and people like that, if you're going into a clinch with Ortega, I'd say try and stay close. Obviously, he'll try and use foot sweeps and things like that to off-balance you and then pick up the snap down. But if you stay close, at least if he tries to snap you down, you can stand up and try and move him to the fence if he's on your head. And that's what it's going to be interesting in this fight, if Holloway goes to the grappling at all, because Ortega is so dangerous on the floor, but he's not infallible. Tavares did very well when he pushed him to the fence, because there was just no threat of a triangle, no threat of the elbows. So finally, Ortega takes like 3 minutes of the round before he realizes he's got to stand up, and he hits a stand up against the fence. So I think going to the fence and leaning on it, or taking Ortega down along it, good places to get breaks for Max if he feels like he needs to. Both guys in good condition, but Max Holloway obviously known for his incredibly high pace. So I'm going through the Reddit discussion thread, which I like to do every morning just to see if anything's interesting. It's a fun way to get your news, to be honest, and your new memes. But someone was like, I've just watched the Aldo fights again, and Aldo just basically gassed from hitting Holloway in the face. You're like, no, Aldo gassed because he loads up and like gives himself a hernia on every punch he attempts, and then as soon as he's done, he sits back and chills. And Holloway was jabbing him and then feinting him and jabbing him every time he tried to take a break. So Aldo would swing hard, and then when he'd be sitting back and taking a break, the thing that people hated him for doing in fights against like Lamas and people like that, he didn't give him a break. So Aldo gassed out where he had never gassed out before, except the Hominick fight, and painkillers, flu, everything else that they said at that time. Holloway's pace is a killer, and he's so good at using the jab. Doesn't have a particularly long reach, but is tall for the weight class. And uses the jab, uses both stances well, switches stances always in motion to the left or right. That's good. Or he'll come down off a kick and switch stances, which is also good. You don't want to be switching stances right in front of the guy, because one, you're there with your feet shuffling around when you can't really move out of the way and they'll hit you. But two, you're showing them the switch. The switch is going to be the surprise. You want to be switched and then moving in, and then they go, wait, why is that coming from that angle? Not in like an internal monologue way, but that's what will be happening, as opposed to them going, oh, he's switched stances, I better be careful here. And Holloway, when he goes to the body, he does actually go to the body a lot more nowadays, but when I first saw him, I think it was the Bermudez fight, I was going, this guy goes to the body really well but he keeps just sort of dropping it to run in with flying knees. He could go to the body off a jab, and that's beautiful. If you watch a guy jab and then dig the body shot with the left hand, it's, you don't have to be super quick at it, but you do have to be very convincing. You have to get the other guy's hands up and get in position to hit him without getting hit back, when you're in pretty much position to be hit back. If you watch a guy who's really good at that, like Tommy Hearns was pretty good at it, Gerald McClellan murdered dudes with that. And obviously Gerald McClellan was very, very long for his weight class, but if you watch him do it, it's so smooth, and it's that whole, slow is smooth, smooth is fast thing. It doesn't look particularly fast, but he gets it in when other dudes really struggle to. There was another, was it Zarate? Yeah, Zarate. Karate, but with a Z, which is like the coolest thing you could ever think of. There's a guy called Zarate who was a Mexican dude, really lanky boxer, and he used to like throw left, not like a hook, but like a body shot, sort of uppercut, sort of hook. He used to throw that basically as his jab. That was how he'd start combinations. Fought a guy called Zamora in a fight that was called the Z Boys. They were both guys with streaks of like 20 knockout wins, and they were meeting to like decide who was the best knockout artist. I wrote an article for Fightland about it. It's just called the Z Boys, or the Z Boys if you're American. Yeah, so caution the snap down, get him to the fence if you need to, bang the body. One of the things about the Philly Shell, I hate Philly Shell, Stonewall, whatever you want to call it, guard, is that you've got an arm across your body. Bruce Lee spoke about this too. He liked a low lead hand because you don't even have to think about the body. Having that little bit of obstruction there just annoys other people, so they have to try and work around it. But, the other thing about that is that if you do like the shoulder roll and you're really going for it, especially if you're not very experienced using it, very easy to get kidney punched. And the kidney punch in MMA, totally legal. Wish we saw more of it. Kidney punch, debilitating if you crack a good kidney punch. It's like being hit in the soul. In the soul's dick. That's what it's like. Being hit in the soul is the liver. Soul's dick is the kidney. I'm very interested to see how well Max can kick in this fight. He's pretty good at those sort of like Fedor-style stumpy low kicks. Fedor used to kick with the inside of the shin. He wrote about it in his book, and there's a seminar floating around on various torrent sites with Alex Emelianenko where he teaches the same thing. And I think they teach it in the Fedor seminar DVD. But there's a few places you can see them doing it, both the Emelianenkos. They throw their kick like very slightly well, not even slightly diagonal. It's more upwards than it is coming in from the side. It's basically at the hip and at the knee. They're just bumping in with the inner shin onto the thigh. Look it up, Fedor Seminar. It'll be on YouTube, I imagine. It was a really weird way to kick, and Holloway does it occasionally, just those stumpy little upward low kicks rather than like proper turn your, well, I say proper, it's a choice you make, but like the turn your hip in and really pump the leg sort of kicks. Holloway's kicking versus Pettis was really sharp. Came out against one of the lightweight division's best kickers and outkicked him. And then he drew him on to a back kick to end the fight, which was gorgeous. Stayed in his face, and then he'd back off, and suddenly Pettis would go, right, forward motion, this is the part of the fight I like, and then he'd walk on to a back kick to the breadbasket, and then goes against the fence, and Holloway finishes him. Pettis has always been another one of those ones like Barbosa. A lot of kickers are like this, to be honest. If you back them up, firstly, you've taken away a lot of their kicking game, because kicking in general requires more real estate. Very hard to kick while going backwards. There was a dude who used to tell me that, like, yes, you can. You jump or you slide back first. And I'm like, well, no, that's not kicking. That's sliding back to make distance and then kicking. Very hard to kick and move backwards literally at the same time while you're on one leg. You're making the decision to stop, stand on one leg, and try and hit the opponent, and that's time that they can move in on you during. Obviously the Rafael dos Anjos fight, a very famous one with Pettis. But I think it'd be interesting to see if Ortega can take a page out of that sort of book, backing Holloway up to the fence. You don't see Ortega attempting a lot of takedowns, which, his wrestling is more like a counter wrestling. It's not wrestling. His grappling is more like a counter wrestling thing. But I think with an opponent, a striker on the level of Holloway, you've got to show him something different. So if he can back him onto the fence, maybe he can hit the snap downs off there. Again, if Holloway can keep him to the fence, very hard to snap a dude down while you're against the fence yourself. Don't know how much success he'll have trying to take Holloway down, even if he does attempt it, because Holloway's takedown defense has looked really good in recent years. Very good at feeding the single, hopping to the fence, and then running out into the space and limp legging out. One of the reasons that I thought would be I was disappointed we didn't get that Khabib match. Obviously, Khabib huge lightweight, and Max really more a big featherweight. But there are a lot of things about Max that if you transposed them onto a good-sized lightweight would give Khabib a lot of trouble. Really understands footwork. And footwork is, if you can wrestle to a decent level, footwork will make the difference against a very good wrestler. Obviously, if you've got great footwork and you can't wrestle to a decent level, you're still getting taken down when they take like a sloppy shot on you. But a lot of these guys at the very highest levels, if you take a sloppy shot at them, it's like we were talking about with Bader versus Johnson the other day. If you take a sloppy shot at them, they're going to shuck that off easy, even if you're a really good wrestler. That's been half of Daniel Cormier's recent career, finding ways to get into grappling exchanges so that he can pick up his high crotch, and he started like giving people the underhook and things like that. But I think for Holloway, volume very important, especially as you can convince Ortega to go into the shoulder roll very easily. So double jabs into right hands when he leans back, double jabs, hook to the body. Got to be careful about putting your face out there because he will elbow you, he'll or come back with an uppercut from hell. Jabbing the face, hitting the body, landing the powerful right hand when you can get him leaning back or turning, and landing low kicks if you can get him into the shell too. For Ortega, I'd say focus on the jab because it's good and he's long for the weight class. Does he have a longer reach than Holloway? I always remember being surprised that Holloway's reach doesn't quite match his height. I think he's, what is he, same height as Daniel Cormier, 5'9" or something like that, but he's got something like a 68-inch reach. I could be talking out my arse here, but I seem to remember being surprised by that, whereas Ortega has always struck me as very long for the weight class. High on the ape index, that's what they say. The ridiculous ones are obviously John Jones, 84 inches, but Kevin Lee is a lightweight with an 80-inch reach, just insane. He'd have like 10 inches of reach on Max if they fought. The feeling I've always got with the Ortega fights when he's not winning from the start, like the Moicano fight, I think the submission came in the third round. The feeling I've always got is like, oh, thank goodness, I got the submission. I'm on the submission now. I never got the feeling that he was working his way back into the fight. I felt, it felt like he grabbed an opportunity and won in an instant, which is something you can do in fighting. Derek Lewis will tell you that. But actually, I was explaining that to some friends the other day. They were just like, "Why do you like fighting so much?" And I was like, "It's the only sport where you can turn up, finish it early, and go home." But I struggle to see Ortega changing the momentum of the fight. He's not whereas I feel like Holloway can lose a round or two and then come back into it. Like he gave away the first round against Aldo the first time. I say gave away, he lost the first round and then he turned it on in the second and third. And then he turned it on in the next round. I feel like Ortega is more like an opportunist in the Carlos Condit style. Rather than a guy who can go back to his corner and they go, yeah, adjust this, and you go out and you have a solid all the way through round in the next round. But we'll see. I'm going to be writing something about it for Unibet later today, so make sure to check that out. And let's have a look at the rest of this card. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, or Joanna Jędrzejczyk, depending on how you want to say it, against Valentina Shevchenko. That's a fun fight. Absolutely baffles me how much of a shit people give about their 3 previous Muay Thai fights, which no one's ever seen. But what were they, 2010, like 8 years ago? And if you look at the photos of them afterwards, like they're children, basically. but people are convinced that that's like the same thing. I think it'd be interesting to see Joanna up at 125. I like that she's made the decision to go up there and put on a bit of weight. I just love people not cutting the huge amount of weight and then going up and putting the pace on people. If you watch, Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker are now fighting for the title, having both done that through the middleweight division. I love Kelvin Gastelum. They did the coaches challenge on the Ultimate Fighter the other week. I don't watch the Ultimate Fighter. Someone put the clip on Reddit. It was running a 5K around a track, and Robert Whittaker sets off and is just beautifully running this 5K, and he's like, yeah, I always come in shape. I try and stay in shape in the off season and so on. And Kelvin Gastelum's done like 3 laps and is just dying. I just love him because in the off season he can't even run a 5K, but then he comes in and puts the pace on dudes at middleweight and exhausts them. So mad respect to Kelvin Gastelum. But yeah, I'm hoping, Joanna can do that up at 125. One of the interesting things about... People think I hate Valentina Shevchenko. Once again, I just... It's these bizarre fan bases that I love making fun of. Valentina Shevchenko is a very good fighter. I've liked her since the first Nunes fight. And the things that are wrong with her, the flaws rather, have been the same since then. If the opponent's going to come to her, she'll fight well on the counter. She'll put on bursts of offense if they don't come to her. But she doesn't really push it. Like, you don't get the sense that she ever feels like she needs to win a round. Very Masvidal-esque in that sense. So, in the first Nunes fight, she was catching the front headlock off takedown attempt, hitting a knee, and then spinning into a back fist. And you're like, that's an awesome flurry. Now why are you standing there doing nothing for the next 20 seconds? People, the stock excuse for anything that isn't perfect about Valentina is, yes, but she's fighting bigger women. And you're like, well, that doesn't change her pace. She should be out there putting the pace on these people. She's very chill when perhaps she shouldn't be. Jacek, on the other hand, is, 100 punches around fighter. And I think that's actually going to play into Shevchenko's game a lot better. If you look at the piece I wrote before the Rose fight was called Rose Namajunas represents a change of pace. And I didn't mean like actual pace. Well, maybe I did in a certain way, but she was just a completely different style to to the three reasonably accomplished opponents that Jacek had fought. I'm not including like Valerie Letourneau. Sorry, I slayed myself laughing at the idea of Valerie Letourneau as a top level fighter there. No, if you think about like Jessica Andrade, Claudia Gadelha, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, just people who get in your face. And Jacek's jab was incredibly accurate against those people because they were putting their face on it the entire time. Then she fought Rose, who doesn't lead very much. Well, she does lead, but doesn't pursue her opponent, doesn't like pressure them or try and tire them out. And she's just like throwing awkward missing kicks and combinations at her. Obviously, people will remember things like the Carla Esparza fight where Joanna came forward and was setting up the right hand and cracking her with that. And after that fight, everyone was like, "Oh my god, Joanna and Jacek right hand knockout puncher." And then obviously that turned out to not be the case. I feel like both Valentina and Joanna benefit from people coming to them, but where Valentina realizes that to the point where she won't lead that much. If you don't lead at Joanna, she'll come forward and try and lead at you, and that's giving Valentina what she wants. Who knows? Maybe we see like classical Ernesto Hoost style combinations into low kicks and things like that. I saw at ATT the footage they were putting out from there on the embedded. She was working on a lot of like Muay Thai clinch stuff. That'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see Jacek just try and take her down, because Jacek's wrestling, certainly from a defensive standpoint, has been absolutely phenomenal. I'd hoped that she'd try and take Rose down, because Rose's wrestling hasn't always been super sharp. Rose is still very much from the school of women's MMA that's like head and arm throw anytime someone grabs a clinch. But no, I think that's what's going to probably happen. You're going to see more of the same from the Rose fight, but with slightly less subtle feinting and jumping in with leads and things. The first Rose fight I'm talking about. The second Rose fight too, to a degree. But then Joanna's speed is very much what she should be pushing in this fight. She can do that flappy hands into low kick thing very, very well. And, I've seen like a clip of one of the 3 Muay Thai matches against Shevchenko. A Muay Thai match could be getting boxed up, it could be getting kickboxed up, it could be being knocked off balance by the teep, which no one is using in MMA. It's very limited opportunities to just use the teep and knock people off balance every time they kick. Could be entirely from the clinch. So you never know. Like, there's nothing to say that because she lost these 3 matches that were a form of kickboxing, she was losing the actual kickboxing in terms of like, punch kick stuff. But we'll see. I mean, I have always, like, my joke about Valentina Shevchenko is missed check hooks, turning missed check hooks into, split decision wonderment. I'm going to put up that intro just on its own. Someone edit it onto Eubanks and Valentina highlights. If you can find any Eubanks highlights, I'll be impressed. But yes, missed check hooks has always been Valentina's thing. Lean back really far, miss a check hook, go yeah, and then hope that you win the decision. Like the fight against Holly, people are like, oh, absolute clinic. And you're like, there's about 10 strikes landed in the whole thing. But I think with Joanna going forward and actually trying to push a pace, that style of counter-striking will be much more effective. Remember that you have to down your drink any time that Valentina Shevchenko throws a spin kick from on her left leg. And misses entirely. I'm teasing, but she has some very, very noticeable habits that don't actually add anything to her game. Honestly, I just hope that it's an absolute banger. Sorry, the Luftwaffe seem to be checking in on me. What was I saying before that plane flew over? The weight class is a joke. It's been created for Valentina to win a title. The fact that Joanna's going up, or offered to go up and do it, this division at all interesting. There is nothing else going on. All the build-up to this, and with the news that Eubanks is going to bantamweight, has been like, well, imagine how badly Valentina would have killed her. And you're like, well, that's the state of the division. You're trying to claim that we need this division just because you want a belt on Valentina, But you also can't name a single person that she should fight. It's bullshit. It's just like the featherweight belt. No reason for it actually to exist. But it is a nice trinket to put on, effectively, one of the better... If Cyborg versus Nunes weren't coming up, I would say this is the best super fight in women's MMA history. Interesting thing came out today that Joanna Jędrzejczyk said that she's aiming to become the greatest of all time female mixed martial artist. And people were like, well, no, she's already lost to Rose twice. And I'm like, I think she already is, probably, on what she's accomplished, the GOAT of women's MMA. You could include... Rousey probably... Did she have more wins? I can't remember, but they were mainly over in a division, whereas Joanna actually kept the title for a good length of time against good fighters in a good division. The good division for women. Can we talk a minute about the style disparity between Ortega and Joanna Jędrzejczyk? Brian Ortega turns up... Anytime I watched Brian Ortega fight originally, I was like, this kid looks like a white rasta. That dude. He had the dreadlocks in, or the braids or whatever. He's just, oh God, that's terrible. And then you see him outside the ring when he doesn't have the braids in, and he's got this wonderful ponytail that's got mane and tail sort of shine. And he's wearing these jumpers that are turtleneck and short sleeve and a big scarf. And you're just like, this dude must slay. Yeah, hi, I'm the number 2 fighter in the world, and I also dress like a model. But it's kind of hit and miss, because sometimes he'll do that, and then other times he'll turn up in a bandana, and you're like, oh, you're pretty trash, aren't you, actually? You don't even know how hot you are, or why you're hot. Not like my boy Dustin Poirier, who has found his feet as a style icon for the MMA community. No for gay Brian. Go gay for Brian, is what I say. Joanna Jędrzejczyk is a complete opposite end of the spectrum. She dresses like a weird tomboy. She was wearing the mummest mum jeans I've ever seen for the stare down with Valentina. Meanwhile, Valentina always in a short jumper that exposes the midriff. What's the point of a jumper that exposes the midriff? You're just going to get cold. But that's enough on the style do's and don'ts. Mind you, Holloway, if he turns up with his UFC belt tie again, that's the coolest shit I've ever seen. With the exception of Melvin Manhoef turning up in a sharkskin suit before the ritual sacrifice of Sakuraba. What else is going on this card? Alex Oliveira versus Gunnar Nelson, like that. If you're Oliveira, you're getting to the body early and you're using clinches and you're dragging the fight into the third round. But if you're Oliveira, you're probably not going to do any of that. If you're Gunnar Nelson, you're limiting the exchanges. You're trying to come in off that slappy left hook into the right straight. You may be kicking the legs and body. Actually, Oliveira was showing a nice front kick to the body too in the whatever his last fight was. Bokniak versus Hakeem Duwado. That's just a fun fight that they've decided to put on the main card. Thiago Santos versus Jimmy Manuwa. I feel like, that was supposed to happen already. And they had Santos versus... Who was it? Was it your boy, Eric Anders? But yeah, Santos, great fun and also enormous. I wouldn't be surprised if he's bigger than Manuwa. I have no idea how that man made middleweight. Manuwa, the problem is that has always been that he can't always take the shots the best. but has a wicked sort of like left hook and to the body, left hook to the head pairing. His overhands come along in leaps and bounds. He didn't used to have much of a right hand, and now he does it. He's starching dudes with it. Yeah, that's just a fun one. I don't have an awful lot to say on that technique and tactic-wise. I'm just looking forward to these two big lads taking lumps out of each other until one falls down probably a couple of minutes into the first round. Claudia Gadelha versus Nina Ansaroff. Standard Gadelha fight. She'll probably win 1.5 rounds and then gas. But that's enough if you're in a 3-round fight. Jessica Eye versus Kate. That's my reaction to that fight. Your boy's back. Eric Anders versus Elias Theodorou. I like Elias, but he does have slower fights. Eric Anders, I feel like he's sort of dropping off as a prospect. I feel like something's gone wrong with him because he was really looking good up until the Machida fight. Looked good in the Machida fight, and then suddenly just started to lose a step. But I really liked what he was doing, where he was just pushing guys to the fence, coming in behind the heavy punch, and then using the clinch to knee and elbow. Gilbert Burns versus Aubin Mercier. This is good. This is a good fight. Gilbert Burns, all kinds of Blacksplosive. Olivier Aubin Mercier, lovely jab. Both good grapplers. Again, don't really know what to expect from that, because Gilbert Burns has like flashes of really good stuff on the feet, but also very much seems to be a guy who's like waiting for his big punch rather than setting things up cleverly and carefully, like, Dan Hooker. This podcast could just be the Dan Hooker love hour, to be honest. I do just love Dan Hooker. I think everyone should be more Dan Hooker. Ratchik versus Clark. Jessica. Oh, sorry, I've listed this twice, Jessica. The fight's so forgettable, I put it in twice on my list. Brad Katona Lopez. Chad Lepre versus Diego Lima. Fun enough. Diego Ferrer. Yeah, the only one I'm really sad about is losing Bektik versus Moicano off this card. Real shame. However, that's the state of the card. It's looking pretty fucking good. I'm going to write something on it for Unibet, so check that out on Unibet tomorrow, or check it out on the Fight Primer. I'll link to it. No questions today, because this is like a cheeky extra poddy, but feel free to sign up to the Patreon to support the podcast and help me do more mini poddies and cheeky late week poddies and preview poddies and things like that. And also to get history episodes, there is a 2.5 hour episode on the Taiping Rebellion up now. It is epic in length and decent in quality. There'll be a Muhammad Ali Sonny Liston episode coming before the end of December. And I'll hopefully be putting up a couple of things that I'm working on, just sort of book-wise. Just going to put in a couple of chapters that I've been working on and keep the Patreon boys happy. If you have a question to send to the podcast, fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. We will return to questions on Tuesday when we do our normal podcast. And if you use any of this information to bet, please don't come to me when you lose everything. The only good betting advice is to bet on all the favourites on all Bellator cards. Right, I'm your boy Jack Slack. I'm going to get out of here for this week. Brian Ortega's hair bless.